It's a movie.
So a star with your name above the title for over 40 years. How's that happened? Is it just good acting, or is it, do you think, perhaps that you're good looking?
No.
Do you think you're handsome?
No.
Other people do.
What's that good luck, isn't it? Nothing to do with me.
How would you describe your looks to a blind person?
Scrawny. Good eyes. Got those from my mother. Average, I'd say. A little more than average. Because I've got a quality inside me which alters the face. And I've had a long, long business training with that. But if I disseminate myself, I'm pigeon-chested, I'm very scrawny, I've got a thin neck, I've got a very small head, I've got a very bad mouth, which I try to control. I'm getting looped here. Well, we're all doing that as we get older. Not you, you're all right, Russell. You know, it's impossible to describe yourself. But I know that there is a quality. I've got a quality, and the quality is what they call charm. And I flog it.
In your 4 autobiographies, and particularly in the latest, which you call Backcloth, you've written about the war, the last war, as the single most significant thing in your life. Now, in that war, did you ever kill anybody?
Personally, no. Impersonally, can you say that? Indirectly, yes, I killed a lot of people because I picked targets for the RAF. All over France, all over Germany, all over Holland. And sometimes we used to always warn them and drop leaflets, but sometimes the wind took the leaflets out and blew them away. So quite a number of French villages went, and especially in Normandy. And the Americans were just great at doing that, but they didn't drop leaflets, they just bombed everything that moved. But to answer your question succinctly, yes, I was responsible at the age of 23 for a lot of deaths. I went to see quite a lot of them after. I mean, I went back to the villages and saw what I'd done. I used to go painting, as you know, when I had any time off. And I went to one village in Normandy and painted it because I had picked it particularly, and it was a waste of time because everybody had got through. And I found what I thought in the rubble was a whole row of footballs. And they weren't footballs. I was sitting right beside them painting, and they weren't footballs, they were children's heads. And what it was, I discovered later, was a whole school of kids, a convent, had been pulled out of school, out of class, and lined up in this little narrow alleyway between the buildings to save them from the bombing. And the whole thing had come in on top of them, plus the nuns. But by that time, they were lice-ridden and there was nothing. I can talk about it now at 65 because it's sort of, I'm dispassionate about it, and I've seen worse things since. But that gave me a bit of a turn, yes. I didn't enjoy that. A row of kids' heads that you thought were footballs, and you kicked one and it wasn't. And it rolled away down the rubble. Kind of puts you together.
But in the things you've been talking about, you just said that you saw worse things than that.
Well, that was very small fry. I think it was on the 13th of April, I'm not quite sure what the date was. in 1941, we opened up Belsen Camp, which was the first concentration camp any of us had seen. We didn't even know what they were. We'd heard vague rumors that they were there. I mean, nothing could be worse than that. The gates were open, and then I realized that I was looking at Dante's Inferno. I mean, I still haven't seen anything as dreadful. I never will. And a girl came up who spoke English because she recognized one's badges, and her breasts were like sort of empty purses. She had no top on, and a pair of man's pajamas, you know, the prison pajamas, and no hair. But I knew she was a girl because of her breasts, which were empty. And she was, I suppose, I don't know, 24, 25. And we talked, and she was, you know, so excited and thrilled. And all around us, there were mountains of dead people. I mean, mountains of them. And they were slushy, they were slimy. So when you walked through them, you tried not to, but it was like, well, you just walked through it. And there was a very nice British MP, and he said, you know, don't have any more. Come away, sir, if you don't mind, because they've all got typhoid, and you'll get it, and you shouldn't be here swanning around. And she saw in the back of the Jeep the unexpired portion of the daily ration wrapped in a piece of the Daily Mirror. And she said, could she have it? And he said, don't give her food, because they eat it immediately and they die within 10 minutes. But she didn't want the food, she wanted the piece of Daily Mirror. She hadn't seen newsprint for about 8 years, or 5 years, or whatever it was she'd been in the camp for. So she folded it. You know, it's quite a big double sheet, isn't it, the Mirror? About that size. She folded it up into little pieces, talking all the time, chattering away with this funny broken accent. She was Estonian. And then she hid it, I can only say, on her person. She folded it up. It was quite hard to do, and to hide it there. That's all she wanted. She gave me a big kiss, which was very moving. The corporal was out of his mind, and I was just dragged off. I never saw her again. Of course, she died. I mean, I gather they all did. But I can't really describe it very well. I don't really want to. I went through some of the huts, and there were tiers and tiers of rotting people. But some of them were alive underneath the rot and were lifting their heads and trying. You didn't make me blub, did it? Trying to do the victory thing. That was the worst. Sorry.
A lot of people felt completely sort of deprived and washed out when peace broke out. Felt that their active life had come to an end. How did you greet it?
Same way. The adrenaline had all gone, all the excitement, the feeling of being needed. And I'd grown by that time tremendously dependent on my fellow soldiers, which is why the only time I'm really happy in my life is with a film crew or a camera crew like this, because we're a gang together.
Has that horrifying experience made you stronger in smaller details, like having to deal with a nasty film director or a nasty cameraman or something like that? Have you been able to shout at them because you've been made stronger by that?
I don't think I've ever shouted at a director in my life. That's not my way. Because after the war, I always knew that nothing could ever be as bad. And nothing would be ever as bad. Except terminal illness or something like that. But nothing could frighten me anymore. I mean, no man could frighten me anymore, no director. I'd be nervous, sure, of whether my option was being taken up or a critic was being lousy. I remember one critic saying at one of those press parties, don't think this is going to buy you a good notice. Well, I wasn't cross with him, but I did want to put my foot right there. I hadn't asked him. I didn't want a good notice, but I wasn't frightened of him. Nothing. It was just part of the day. Nothing could be as bad as the war was, or the things I saw in the war.
Why did you elect to come here then after the war and after the successes of films? What was this particular plot of earth? I mean, why did you not live in Paris, for instance?
I don't like cities. And I wanted to live in Provence because it is a very amenable climate. It was just a farmhouse, a shepherd's house. So we did it, you know, I had to do it all from scratch. It's my pad, with a few of the things that I've liked best around me, that's all.
The view has changed.
Alas, yes. Not topographically, because they can't at least alter the mountains, and they can't destroy the pattern of the skyline. When I came here, I couldn't see anything. Now where I'm sitting, I can see the industrial town for Grasse, which is about 40, well, it's not very far away, but, you know, they shove the peasants into blocks of flats. It's so wicked and cruel. Ladies jump off the roof out of sheer despair and Valium. But they're selling up because they can't work the land. It's better, you know, it's easier to be in the checkout at Monoprix. The hours aren't so long, and the pay is better. And so they sell off their plots of land to rich German industrialists or Dutch or Americans or English people. So we've got a rash now of Disneyland, Neo-Provençal villas all around, with wire fences and wishing wells. When I came, it was all green fields here, and all fields of jasmine, of artichokes, of rose de mai.
When you turn to the back of each of your 4 autobiographies, the name that figures most prominently and is covered most frequently is that of Tony Forward. Now, he's your manager and he's your closest personal friend. Do you count yourself blessed in him? Oh,
yes, very much so. He found me on the stage in Rep when he was a young... He was in the army, but he was an agent, about to be. And said he thought I might have something. I was 18. And we made a pact that after the war, because we thought it would only last a year, that I'd go and be represented by him, and I've stayed with him ever since.
But it's more than an agent and client relationship, isn't it? Because you share this house with him.
Yeah, he's here.
Whose house is it?
Mine.
And whose taste is reflected in the house?
Difficult to say, really. It sort of grew like topsy all around us.
I mean, it is a house of exquisite taste, and it does seem to have a kind of unity on it. I wondered whether you had created it together.
No, it just sort of happened. It grew. It's all just... I mean, you're very kind. But it's only all the junk that was, you know, came from the houses in England. It's all just shoved in here in a white room. It looks better.
When you and Forward are here at home in the evening, and everybody... Well, so when we've gone, do you have post-mortems on how the day has...
But if you're inferring that we might sit down knitting and pulling rugs, forget it. That doesn't happen at all.
No, I wasn't inferring that. I was asking...
No, there are no post-mortems. I listen to BBC World News at 8 because I want to know if I have to put a sheet on the lawn saying, help, get me out. You know, like they did in Cyprus and all those other places. And sometimes it's quite fun to see what Mrs. Thatcher's cocked up.
There's a side of you which can be, when it wants to be, rather waspish.
I don't know.
Do you recognise that at all?
I can be taken so far and no further. I don't think that's being waspish. I have lost my temper, but I suppose about 5 times in my life, and it's extremely unpleasant. Because I store up all the things I find as faults in people and let them have it full in the puss. It's not a very beguiling habit, but it's my way of reasserting. Because I'm very often taken for granted because I'm so cuddly and so dear. I ain't. I didn't survive this far by being cuddly and dear. People have to be taught a lesson sometimes, but it's very rare.
You're also a highly polished answerer of oblique questions. I mean, you know that's... I don't mean that. And then you've got that little answer there on your arm to
well,
open up
I know
your...
perfectly well that all my life, when I sit in front of an interviewer, and you're not excluded, that you dig, all of you, dig elephant traps or tiger traps. And I know where they are. You can cover them with bamboo poles and bits of leaf, but I'll get round them. I've fallen into one or two in the past and made up my mind I would never do it again. So that's why I'm a little bit defensive, perhaps, and a little bit spiky, perhaps.
Even a kind of sense, in the sense...
Or avoiding questions by elliptical remarks.
Right. But you see, in a way, you've done that by a very carefully edited picture of yourself, haven't you? By a careful structure of autobiography. You will allow people to know what it is you want them to know about you. There is no totality of a picture.
There is a complete totality of a picture, as far as I'm concerned. But it's all there if you want to read it. But if you're not very bright, you won't get it. You have to read between the lines of everything I ever write anyway.
In a part of Backcloth, you say this: the hermit crab syndrome was firmly fixed, and I only quit that shell as I grew older to find another more suited to my size, but still a shell. I dread, and still do dread, possession.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's ever possessed you.
No.
And you've never felt the need to be possessed.
No. Family. I mean, I would mind not being possessed by family. But I have a sense of... I have no sense of possessions, if all, you know... I don't mind. As long as I've got a little bit of money in my pocket and some ciggies and my bottle of booze in the evening, that's okay.
And somebody to talk to.
Yes, I think you have to have someone to talk to. But I don't talk very much. I get loquacious on aeroplanes. But I'm still in the shell, and you haven't cracked it yet, honey.
Diane Carroll, her dramatic life story is exclusive in this week's Daily Record. Her torrid love affair with Poitier, her bust-up with Brando, and why David Frost said hello, good evening, then goodbye. Now she's a Dynasty superstar. Find out how she made it her way. Wedding bells are ringing in EastEnders for Michelle and Lofty. We join in the fun. And Max Bygrave, Cilla Black and Jimmy Cricket let you in on the secrets of their big day. And 2 Vauxhall Novas must be won in a great free contest. It's all in your Super Daily Record.
Because you can't see where your oil gets to, you need to be sure it's clinging, cooling, bathing, protecting every single part of your engine. Make sure. Fit the one moving part that sees to all the others. Castrol GTX, liquid engineering.
My darling, and the delightfully dry country manor.
My favorite. Oh, my. I'll get some more dry.
My goodness! Dry country manor?
Mine's sweet.
My lamb?
My foot.
My sweet?
Mine's dry.
Oh, my hearing. My eyesight.
My twin. My husband.
My train.
Country manor. So light, so subtle, so buy some.
I've worked with some of the most wonderful and extraordinary creatures. from Brigitte Bardot, aged 18, to Eva Gardner, who is one of my greatest and most beloved friends, to Charlotte Rampling, to Glenda, who was an extraordinary experience for me at 60. But, you know, I started quite early, 26. I couldn't name one that was greater than the other. Maybe Judy Garland was the greatest.
How difficult?
Because with all her monstrousness, and there was monstrousness.
Was there?
Yes, there was. But there was no one like her. And there never will be anyone like her. Not ever again.
Well, let's just talk very briefly about the monstrosity, and then we'll come to celebrate after that. How did you see her behave monstrously?
Out of terror.
What did she do?
Not my terror, her terror.
Yeah.
Well, she was ill-advised all her life. She was blackmailed. She was blackmailed by studios. She was fed drugs and potions and pills. I never saw Judy take a drug in my life. I didn't see her take much of it in the way of a drink. I worshipped every breath she drew and supported her all her life. Well, at least for 10 years of her life.
This is a film called I Could Go On Singing.
Yeah, it was a 3-month movie, 3-month shoot. At the beginning, the crew used to call her Miss Garland. And then, after about that, she said, oh, come on, don't do all that rubbish, I'm Judy. So then, second week, it was Judy, or third week, it was Judy. And anyway, finally, it ended up, is it here? Has it arrived? Which was a kind of heartbreak for me. At that time, she wasn't very happy. She hated the director. She was desperately involved financially and in every other way with the family and everything. You know, all those kind of things was the background. But there were moments of such supreme magic, of such, not too strong a word, beauty, and of such professionalism that it sort of broke you in fragments.
Did you write a bit for that?
I wrote all the scenes that she and I played together.
Who decided that you should do that, or why
I
did you? You did.
Well, they were so awful. And Judy said, I can't do this crap, and wouldn't do it, and was going home to America. And I said, well, you know, let's try together. So I used every phrase that Judy ever used in her own life, because the story really was basically about her, although her name was Jenny Bowman or some goddamn thing. And so we sat together in my house in the country in London, in England rather, for days, working out things that she said. One of the things she said, which I've never forgotten and I'll always stick with, she said, look, I cannot be rolled out like pastry and cut so thin and everybody has a little bite of me. I cannot do it. She said that to me once. I said, that's in.
I don't want to be rolled out like a pastry, so everybody get a nice big bite of me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just me. I belong to myself. I can do whatever I damn well please with myself, and nobody can ask any questions.
Now, you know that is not true, don't you?
Well, I'm not going to do it anymore, and that's final. It's just not worth all the deaths that I have to die.
You have a show to do tonight. You are going to do it, and I am going to see that you do.
I turned my back on her, because one day she said, you know, you'll do it. You'll do what all the others have done to me. This is after 10, 12 years of very close friendship. She said, one day you'll do what all the others have done. You'll turn your back, and you will walk away from me. She said, otherwise you'll walk away from me with your back, but facing me in case I throw a knife. And I did exactly that. I didn't feel proud about it, or happy. But there was a time when you had to give her up because she was danger. She was destroying herself, and in doing so, she would have destroyed anybody near her, and especially those she knew who loved her. And I loved her very much.
Other side, does cuckoo. I could go on singing till the cows come home. Then the rooster starts to crow, crow, crow. When I see your eyes, I go all out. I must vocalize till you shine. Enough already. I could go on singing till the moon turns pink. Anything from Faust to ink. Kidding, kidding.
I was feeding the chickens in a chicken run in my house in Rome. And somebody, the little man who ran the garden, came running through the fields waving a telegram. They were very exciting in the village to have a telegram. And he said, telegram, a telegram, a telegram. So I took it through the wire, and there were all these bloody pullets running around me. And I opened it. It was from a woman I didn't know very well, and she simply said in the telegram, desperately sorry for you, how much you must miss her. I thought, who is it? Who is it? My mother? My aunt? My sister? Who? She was the greatest star we ever had, and I knew it was Judy. Judy had died.
Two things have struck me most vigorously or forcibly in the last day or two since I've been here. One is that you make constant reference to your age. Now, why is that? Are you surprised by the fact that you're still alive?
Oh, no, I'm not surprised. I'm a bit angry that I'm so old. Because, you know, my time has been cut.
Do you feel older?
Yeah.
Tireder?
Not really tired, but I can't do the things I did before, and that's very, you know, annoying.
Round about the garden or the house?
I can't do all the mowing I did and the work I did physically. And the awful thing is I don't give a damn. That comes with age. And then you know you're getting a little bit older. I used to care terribly about these terraces and spend hours mowing them and keeping them clean. I just wanted it to be well kept and tended. I don't care now, as long as it doesn't look neglected. But the point of giving up has not arrived, but I know that it will.
Are you not rich enough to have somebody to do that for you?
No. Well, I never got paid very much money in, you know, in salaries, and books don't make a lot of money. I think my beloved sister always thinks I make millions, and all the telespectators say, oh, you must be so rich with all those residuals you get from every time I'm on Doctor in the House at 2:30 in the afternoon or something. I don't get a penny from it, but of course not. We don't get residuals.
Now, the second thing that has struck me is that you keep saying that this book called Backcloth is your final part of your autobiography.
It's a dead bore to write about yourself all the time. And I think 65 is a very good time to say, okay, that's where it is. I mean, what can happen in the next 10 years that's going to be interesting? It's going to be boring, isn't it? And all the people I knew and all the people I've loved, except for a very few, have dropped off the vine. I suppose you could say the gathering has begun. So there's nothing very much to write about. I know that I won't work in movies very much more, if I ever do. Might do a telly or something here or there. 5 years' work. I've got 5 years. Then I'm 70. What do you do at 70?
Well, what does John Gielgud do at 80?
John, good question. John has a passion for the theatre and for acting. I don't. I don't like it very much. I never have.
What, the theatre?
Either.
Acting?
Hmm.
You don't like it?
Not much.
It's a bit of a revolutionary remark, isn't it?
I don't think so. Why, Russell?
Well, why do you do it?
It made me money.
But it surely also brought you other satisfactions, great satisfaction.
Oh, yes, of course it did. Of course it did. It brought me this. And I suppose a certain amount of achievement, because I think I've made 3 or 4 films that will last longer than I will ever last, which I made with Losi and Visconti. It was a way of earning my living. I skidded through.
Are you sure
I've managed.
Being a little modest?
No, no. You said that I was lowering myself or whatever it was, negating myself once. It's not that. I'm absolutely realistic. If I wasn't realistic, I couldn't be talking to you like this. I've got nothing to lose. And I never meant to fail. I didn't fail. And the only thing I've got to lose is my life. I'm prepared for that.
People say that Death in Venice was your most successful film. Now, was that hard to make?
It was a 6-month shoot to begin with, which is a very long time, from March till the end of August. We got up at 9, our unit call was 9 o'clock at night, because Visconti wouldn't have anyone wearing, you know, the girls had to have their hair made up. He wouldn't have wigs. And that took a long, long time, because it was set in 1910. I had no makeup at all, except black lines here and a bit of dye in the back of my hair. So I was hanging around from 9 o'clock. We then got to 4 o'clock and had a unit meal.
In the morning?
And then we had to wait for dawn, which was usually about 4:30, 5, 4:45, because that was the light that he wanted for the Sirocco, that strange steely grey light. So we could only shoot between 5 o'clock and 7. I knew that I had to die in the film, and I was rather dreading it. And one morning, Visconti came and said, the day you die. So I said, do I? And he said, yeah, because today is Sirocco. It's starting, you can see it. And I could see the strange haze and this funny little ripple of wind coming. So I was painting into makeup, and they were on the table in front of me, there were about 40 tubes, metal tubes of some preparation. They'd all been scraped off. The enamel label had been scraped off very carefully, but rather roughly with a knife, so I couldn't read what it was. And they started to put it on my face, my makeup man, Mauro. And I said, Mauro, what is this? And he said, well, it has to set firm like plaster of Paris so that it'll crack when you start to knife. So I was beginning by this time to burn. And I had only one thought in my mind. I said, Mauro, whatever you do, don't put this stuff near my eyes, because I knew I'd go blind. I don't know what the hell they were putting on. So I was finally made up with that death mask on. It took 3.5 hours. 4 hours, to be exact. I had to breathe through 2 straws, because it's very difficult to breathe through 2 straws. I couldn't open my mouth, because if I'd opened my mouth, it would have cracked the makeup at the side, you see. And I was put in a chair with my hat on, and it was dreadfully hot, because the Sirocco is very, very hot. And I suddenly saw that instead of dying on my own with my crew around me, that Visconti had invited all his friends from Milan or from Turin or from Paris, from everywhere, led by Alida Toscanini, who was sitting there, all under umbrellas, sun umbrellas, in the shade, having a lovely time, watching my death scene, with large flutes of champagne, and all their instamatics going tick, 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 tick. I thought, how am I going to get through this? Because you get a kind of terror. I mean, I didn't know how to die. I didn't know what he wanted, and I wasn't going to be told, because he never told me anything. And his assistant came up, Phil Kokel, and he said he came with 3 sticks, bamboo cane. And he put one in the sand not far away. I couldn't speak. And he said, this is where Tazio and the boy fight, okay? And then he moved a little further down. He said, this is where the fight finishes. And Tazio's left. He went for a long, long way. He walked out into the sea till his knickers were wet and stuck the 3rd stick in the sea. He said, and that's where Tazio is saying, come to heaven, it's lovely, okay? You give me a minute when you want to go? I put up my hand for 2, because at 2, they had to lift off my hat and put a little tiny plastic membrane sack of black dye there, which would melt in the heat engendered by my hat and the sirocco and trickle down my face. And that's what happened. So I died. I have never been in such pain in my life. My face was absolutely scalding, scarred. I knew underneath it was scarlet. So they got me back to the hotel. I couldn't really walk because I was in such pain, I was almost going to cry. I got back to the makeup room and Mara was saying, bravo, 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 again. I said, get this stuff off. And he got a kind of chisel and a hammer. That's not true, but he got a sort of gadget and started to hack, and my face came off with it. So I said, leave it for a moment. Just, can't we do it? Is there no other way of taking it off? And Mara said, well, the instructions all were in English. So he gave him one of the tubes, which was half squeezed out. The others had all been used up and thrown away. And they'd scraped, as I told you, everything off, except one little bit at the bottom I read in English. He said, it's very good, it's made in England. It's okay, so it won't hurt you. I was dying of pain. And it said at the bottom, for industrial use only, to remove oil stains from machinery and whatever else it was. Keep away from skin and from eyes, and at all, wash all the time, gargle, do everything. Don't put it near you. And there I was, sitting like a lemon, covered in it, except, thank God, for my eyes, which I had made him stop doing. Well, it took me 4 hours to get it on, and about 2.5 to get it off, because it hurt so dreadfully. And by the time it was off, I looked as I had been roasted. Not very well roasted. I looked like a McDonald's, It was... Anyway, they sloshed something on, and I had to go to work the next morning.
Certain people in Hollywood were entranced by the music of Death in Venice.
Well, we showed the film in Death in Venice. They took the film over to the the whiz kid financial men who put $100,000 in to run it for them, and there was dead silence, and Visconti was very pleased. He had Coco with him, his assistant. They sat at the back, and at the end of it was absolute dead silence. Nobody had moved. They hadn't lit those 10-foot cigars, and they were all in their shiny blue alpaca suits. And Visconti thought to himself, he told me later, we've won, because they're so moved that they can't turn around. But they weren't moved. They were horrified. They were appalled. They couldn't believe what they'd seen. And so the lights went up, and Visconti thought he'd better say, do you have any questions? Nothing. Silence. And they just looked at each other. And everybody was sort of crouched with horror. They spent $100,000 on what they called an old man chasing a kid's backside. That was exactly the phrase they used. But one man, whose name I won't mention, was the domestic distributor at the time for America. He felt it incumbent upon himself to say something. So he got up and he said, I have to say that I think that the score is just great. Who did the theme music, Mr. Visconti? And Visconti looked rather delighted that somebody had spoken to him, at least with kindness, and said, oh, the music is by Gustav Mahler. And Mr. XYZ said, well, gentlemen, I think we should sign him.
What was this room before it was a writing room?
It was the olive store, where they used to store the olives from the trees. It's sort of my world, I suppose you call it. I call it the ego room because I don't think anywhere in my house you would ever see any sign that I was an actual writer, would you?
A lot of people seem to have been surprised that you turned out to be a good writer. Were you?
Yes, very. Actors aren't supposed to be able to really write much more than their autographs.
How important is this square yard of territory in your house? I mean, can you write anywhere, or do you have to be there?
No, I've got to be here. I usually write a book 4 times. I wrote Backcloth about 8 times, I think, the stuff there. Honing it, cutting, adverbs, adjectives. I don't know who cares. Certainly not the critics who read it, because they skip read.
You're very strong on dialogue, especially in the autobiography. Do you have total recall or something like an eidetic memory?
I have a very good memory for dialogue, and I remember voices, particularly. And those files up there behind me, those were part of the letters of a woman I wrote to in America. So they were always there, and they were kind of like a voice. And if I'd forgotten how exactly she spoke, I only had to take down a handful of her letters and read.
Who was she?
I'm not going to tell you.
Do you know her?
Well, I know her, but I never met her. I never spoke to her. We wrote every day for about 7 or 8 years. Every day. Quite a lot of writing. And when I couldn't write letters, I wrote postcards, so there were millions and millions of them. And she was an American woman who was a widow and sort of forced me to write. And we wrote for 8 years.
What about?
Oh, anything and everything, because I knew that she was dying. I twigged quite soon she was. And I wrote a lot of fantasy letters. I mean, the letters were real, but I invented things to make her laugh, to paint pictures that she would imagine and see in the hospitals and in the times that she used to call l'heure verte, that awful period of time between 5 o'clock and 7 in the evening when you can't have your whiskey in. It's the sad time of life, right? Of the day, rather. So she wrote, and I wrote, and she wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote copiously and kept on making me write and correcting my syntax, my grammar, split infinitives, and she never corrected my spelling. taught me how to paragraph. It was a correspondence course, and practically it became a love affair.
Isn't it strange? I was just going to ask, that was the next question, but you preempted that. But what kind of love would it be?
Oh, it was a totally imaginary, sterile love affair. It couldn't be anything else. I believe, I have no idea who she was. I picked up a little bit since she's died, but I do know the only clue she gave me, and because she lied as much as I lied in my letters, which, as I said, were fantasy letters. I do know the one clue she gave me was that when she was 12, she made a pass at a steward on the Lusitania. So that had to make her quite an elderly lady. Well, when I finished Backcloth, which we're talking about, I've said in the front that I would burn everything that I ever had that belonged to her or came from her or was written to her, because all her letters were sent back to me by her daughter when she died, who was a very sweet and very kind woman. And this huge box came back full of all that, and I burnt them all. I burnt all my war diaries, my letters to my father. There is nothing left of me at all written.
Why?
I've written 4 autobiographies. I know who I am, I know where I am, and I don't see any point in somebody a long time later riffling through the memorabilia and the debris of my life, and especially all those years of letters to somebody I wrote as a spur to keep alive. They weren't true. She knew they weren't true. She knew I was exaggerating. I didn't have Dom Perignon for lunch every day, and I exaggerated everything to make it more glamorous, to make it more joyful. If I talked about violets, they weren't wild violets growing in the trees around here under the olives. They were Parma violets. Well, it's balls, of course, it's rubbish. But I made them Parma violets because she adored Parma violets. So if those things are found when I go, they won't be true. They won't be representative of me any more than my letters were.
Well, were the war diaries representative of you?
Very, very. But
Well,
they were so gauche and so naive. And I picked the best of them out and put them in the diaries, untouched, in the autobiography. They're untouched. They're exact as I wrote them. I haven't changed anything, even the spelling.
It's the attitude and the action of a very orderly man, isn't it?
I think it's the attitude of somebody covering up. Somebody covering up from people who don't know and don't understand and never have known. A generation that thinks, oh, well, that's what you must have been like. And you weren't like that at all. It was part of you. Of course it was part of you. But read in cold light, they would be wrong. And in any case, they're my private writings. And I put them all in the books, as much as you need to know, and that's it. So they've gone. And my manager forward said, when we burnt them, when I burnt them, he said, well, there's this great pile of ashes just up there if you want to go and shoot it in close-up. That's a part of your life in ashes. I've always taken everything for the day, and I never look back. No point in looking back, because it's gone. The door has closed. I've got a door now at 65 that's on the swing. It's creaking a bit. And one day, I don't know where I shall be, it would be nice to think I'd be here. I don't suppose I will be. But I'll hear the bang. And I'll know it's a closed door. And that'll be the door at the very end of my tunnel of life.